but it's 30 years of passion, purpose, learning, and consistently getting yourself out there to go to the next level. Anyone who's watching this can do that.
Yeah.
And you were presenting on how to invest in British property, and I was investing on, teaching people how to invest in South African property.
Yeah.
And we basically met on stage. And I don't believe that any person, I don't care how much money you've got, can be an expert in all the different countries, all the different markets, all the different subsectors, all the different assets. It's impossible. They put it's all of their money into one deposit.
Risk in one property,
completely,
right?
and literally it takes the tenant not to pay, and the whole thing falls over.
Yeah. So it's allowing international investors to come in to get a little bit of the cash flow and the equity growth without having to get a mortgage, without having to buy the property.
And what I learned through the crash was that the real money is made in the likes of commercial property and sort of at the next tier.
Yeah.
But most people just don't have the money, don't have the time, or don't have the knowledge.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Property Magic Podcast. This comes out every Tuesday, and my goal is to give you insights into the property investing world and bring special guests to inspire you and share a bit of their expertise. And today I have a very special guest. In fact, Scott Picken is the first person to guest on this who's not actually done my property mastermind program yet, Scott.
Quite an accolade.
There's an application form at the back, obviously, if he's going to do that. But so I wanted you to come on here, Scott, because I know you're obviously based in South Africa, happen to be in the UK, so I thought let's seize the opportunity to have this, because you've got a really interesting background, not just in property, but generally in investing. And I thought everyone listening or watching the podcast could learn a lot from you, Scott. So welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And I think we've known each other pretty much 20 years now, Scott. So do you want to tell me how we first met and what we've been doing over those last 20 years?
I must admit, it's a little bit surreal actually to be back in Birmingham, because it was literally 20 years ago. We were on stage here somewhere, I don't remember where, and you were presenting on how to invest in British property, and I was investing on, teaching people how to invest in South African property.
Yeah.
And we basically met on stage, and sure, I can't believe it was 20 years ago, quite frankly.
Time flies when you have fun, right?
We've learned a few tricks in 20 years, that's for sure.
We have.
Right?
And our paths have actually crossed a number of different times over that. So I think the next time was about 2013. I think we were both mentored by Roger Hamilton, weren't
Correct.
we?
Yeah,
I know we both invested a lot of money in our own education. I think that's why one of the reasons we're successful, right? Because we're constantly investing in ourselves and upskilling and upgrading. And I was at an event in 2013, and I learned all about peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding. And I thought, wow, what if we do that in property? At the time, I was working with private investors, like I teach my students to, because everyone runs out their own money at some point.
Yep.
And I was doing commercial to residential conversions purely with private lenders' money. People were lending chunks and multiples of 50K. And when I was listening to Simon on stage talking about his business, I realized that there were lots of people who would love to get a better return on money, but didn't have 50K. And I thought maybe we can help a lot more people. And at the same time, lots of our mastermind students had really good developments that they would maybe run out of their own money. I thought if we put the two together on a platform and take care of all the regulations, all the legal work and the paperwork, we could have a really good business. And that's when I set up Crowd Property, just lending money on a debt basis. And you had a very similar idea, but you do equity. So tell us all about Wealth Migrate and the concept behind that.
No, perfect. Look, there's a couple of things you said there that I'd like to touch on. So let me answer your question about Wealth Migrate, and we'll come back to Roger as well, because I think that's important. So look, in simple terms, I was quite similar to you. I'd helped 2,500 people buy houses. And what I learned through the crash was that the real money is made in the likes of commercial property and sort of at the next tier. Yeah. But most people just don't have the money, don't have the time, or don't have the knowledge. So I was sitting in an event, probably a very similar event to the one you were at, and I was like, well, how do we actually use technology to allow people to come together to have the buying power of the institutions? Because normally you need a couple of £1 million, £10 million or whatever to be able to take down a good quality asset. And just to give you an example, in 2008, 2009, the developers in England were in serious trouble.
Yeah.
And Barratt Homes, which is one of the biggest developers in England, they had a development in Wimbledon. There were 48 units. We could buy those units at 40% of replacement cost.
Wow.
So we could literally buy them.
So cheaper than they can actually build the properties for.
60% cheaper than they can build.
Yeah.
Like we could buy them for £160,000 each. They were fully tenanted, fully furnished. And there was one small problem. We had to buy all 48 at the same time, and we needed £10 million.
Yeah.
So I ran around to my 2,500 investors. I just couldn't get people to work together and participate. I went in to talk to the developer, and like I said, look, is there any way I can just buy one? And they literally just laughed me. They literally laughed me out the boardroom, And that created so much pain for me that I was like, we have to figure out a way to use technology to come together to invest like the institutions. Because if we had £10 million, Those properties today are worth £750,000, so they would have 4x'd in value, and we would have enjoyed an 8% return the entire time. I mean, it's a no-brainer, actually, if you think about it. So yeah, in principle, that's what Wealth Migrate was. We built a platform to allow people to invest in deals. You're on the debt side, we're on the equity side. So they actually own a piece of the asset. They own the income, they own the capital growth. And what we've done is we've also believed very strongly in diversification. So whether it's England or America or Europe or Australia, people have the ability to diversify into different countries, currencies, assets, partners.
I think that's really important. I think a mistake that many investors make, they're just thinking too local, and they have all their money in one currency or all the money in one asset. Like, I don't think people should put everything into property. I think within property you can diversify different types of property, different areas. I think you should be investing in stocks, you should be investing in business. So it's really important to generally diversify. But I think people struggle, and if you're investing overseas, there's a lot of risk and hard to do due diligence. So come to something like Wealth Migrate, a lot of that's taken care of, I guess.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it's very much a mindset of property investors. You know, if I live in Birmingham, I invest in Birmingham. Like even to invest outside of Birmingham is quite a big thing for people to get over. So what that tends to happen is that they invest local to their geography, local to their knowledge. But it also means they have all their eggs in one basket. So there's multiple problems that happen because you might own 10 properties in Birmingham, which is great, except for if something happens, then you've got all your eggs in one basket. The other problem people make, particularly when they invest internationally, you know, people all over the world buy London property. Everyone knows that, okay? But they take all of their life savings and they invest in one property in London. They put like it's all of their money into one deposit. That's a big risk
in one property,
completely, right? And like literally it takes the tenant not to pay, and the whole thing falls over. You know. So back to your thing around diversification, and look, in the past you needed millions of pounds to diversify. Quite frankly, you know, and because it was difficult, you needed lots of money, you needed lots of staff to be able to run structures and everything else. You don't need any more. You know, with technology now, you can participate, you can diversify with far smaller amounts of capital. So I always say it allows you to invest like the top 1%, but with more, it democratizes access, you know, and it's exactly the same as what you did with crowd property. You've just taken an asset class that used to only be for the bastions of the very wealthy, the top 1%, and you've democratized access. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know, we've known each other for a long time, and you're here because you work with local partners in each country. You have the local expertise and the ability to find deals, and we've got something exciting, which I won't talk about too much now, but we are working with investors who've got equity tied up, who want to release that equity, and so it's allowing international investors to come in to get a little bit of the cash flow and the equity growth without having to get a mortgage, without having to buy the property, and also diversify amongst lots of investment. I'm really pleased to be your local partner, helping you find those opportunities, and you've got people all over the world doing that. Where do you see the real opportunities at the moment around the world? I mean, obviously, you've got a much more global aspect than I have. Where do you think the opportunities are, Scott?
So I just want to take a step back and answer what you said there, which is really important. I think to succeed, there's three things you need. And people think it's 30, they think it's 300. It's not. It's three things. You need the right information, you need the right partners, and you need to be able to diversify. So back to your point, I don't believe that any person, I don't care how much money you've got, can be an expert in all the different countries, all the different markets, all the different subsectors, all the different asset classes. It's impossible. So the only way to do it is to find qualified partners that are already doing it. So if I take someone like yourself, I've known you for 20 years. You've been investing for, what, 30 years. It's like, you know, I'm the same. I'm like 28 years. But my point being is that I'd much rather be working with someone like yourself who's on the ground. I mean, with Picken, you've got access to kind of, 40
plus all over the country.
40 plus all around the country. I mean, there can't be too many people in the country that have their finger on the pulse. You know, the way you do with Picken, the way you do with crowd property on the debt side. I mean, really, if you take a person that's getting the right information, you'd be hard to beat. Does that make sense? Okay. Then the partner part that I like the most is that I look for people that are doing it. I don't want a Harvard professor to come teach me how to do it. I want to actually partner with someone who's doing it. So what I like about you, Simon, is you teach people how to do it, but you're doing it yourself. And what I think is the most exciting evolution around the world is that in the old days, you and I would stand on stage, people would come learn from us, but then they had to go do it themselves. I think that's completely changed now. Now they can learn from you and they can invest with you. And I mean, I've got a mastermind around the world, and you know, we got members in 178 countries, and I mean, you've presented to them, and people are like, I could learn all about English property, or I could just partner with Simon, and it's a bit of a no-brainer. Does that make sense? So that comes to number two, and that's why we're super grateful to be partnering with you on the ground here. And the third part is obviously the diversification part, but to do that, you need quality partners. So you need 1 and 2 to achieve 3. So let's go to your question around where the opportunities lie. It's an interesting one because what comes to mind when I come to England, and one of the reasons I come and I get on the ground, I talk to people, I talk to the Uber drivers, you just get a sense of what's going on. And what comes to mind for me with England is that Warren Buffett saying, be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful.
Yes.
Okay. I find in England at the moment that people are quite nervous. You talk
Absolutely.
to the average landlord, they don't know what's going on. I mean, every single person I talk to is talking about the laws changing around tenancy and all of this stuff, and that presents an opportunity.
Yeah.
So what I really like about a number of the things that you've been talking about is through your networks, you've got access to deals, you've got access to other investors, and using technology, we can partner with you to unlock those deals. Now, whether that's someone that actually owns a property and wants to do equity release, or again, I like the way you do creative stuff. So to find opportunity, you've got to be creative. You can't just do what everyone else does. I often say to people, you don't want to be a mom and pop investor. So what I mean by that is, don't just go and buy that flat across the road, stick a tenant in it. The chances are you're not going to do any better than someone else, whereas you're doing it a lot more creatively.
Yeah.
So where the opportunities lie, in my opinion, is to find partners on the ground that understand the market and are being creative to take advantage of the market, whether that's a good market or a bad market. Does that make sense? Now,
completely.
I can't give you, you're the expert, not me, as to whether England is in a good market or bad market. I think it's an opportunity market.
Same here.
So there's opportunity definitely here.
Because as you said, most investors are sitting back waiting. They're nervous about new government, new legislation, interest rates, and they're sitting back waiting, which means those of who are educated, some huge opportunities waiting for us, and not much competition.
Completely. And I think if you take America on the other side of the pond, there's a huge amount of opportunity in America. I'm not going to get into a political debate as to whether people do or don't like the current leader. But at the end of the day, there is an optimism around what's happening. But again, America is a massive place.
Yeah.
People don't understand this. There's 300 MSAs. So MSA is a metropolitan statistical area. Like 300 different cities.
Yeah.
So where do you start?
Exactly.
Which state do you start in? etc. And that's again comes back to what I prefaced it with: right information, right partners. Because there's certain states that are far more attractive. There's population growth, there's economic growth, there's jobs, and because of that, the whole place is rising, whether you go residential or commercial. So that would be my kind of take on it. Europe, we've been in Germany looking at opportunities in Germany. Again, I like to diversify. I want to be in Europe. The euro is, I'm not giving financial advice, but the euro is expected to increase in the value against the US dollar. So you want to be the pound as well, for the record, against the US dollar. And so it's these type of things that one needs to take into account in the big picture. And the final thing I would say, which I think is also really, really critical, is that when you're looking at different asset classes, there's certain asset classes that have long-term potential.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's one gentleman, I'm just going to call him Ben. I'm not going to mention his surname. He's worth £500 million. Okay. They have 3 generations of property here in England. They own everything cash, no mortgages from the bank. And when I said to him, what are you investing in? Now, they own lots of buildings in central London and office and everything. And I said, what are you investing in? He said, residential.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So because people need houses. Okay.
Yeah. We have this massive 300,000 requirement every year. We're just not building enough.
Exactly. However, the mindset's different. It's not go and buy that flat across the road like a mom and pop investor.
He's buying blocks
it's
of
how do you
flats
do it at an institutional level.
Yeah.
So I think that's a massive opportunity, not just in England, but elsewhere as well. We're doing the same in America with multifamily. I really like industrial logistics. With the way e-commerce is going, someone has to deliver the stuff.
Yeah.
And probably the one that I am most excited about, but are battling to get into. So if anyone knows how to do this, between you and I, we need to figure it out. But it's data centers. If that classic saying, when there's a gold rush, sell the spades.
Yes.
I don't know whether I should invest in Bitcoin or Ethereum or XRP or whatever, or the next AI. But I know one thing: they all run on a data center.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating with data centers, which people don't understand, supply is constrained because of power.
Yeah.
So they can't build enough data centers, but demand is doubling every 6 months.
Wow.
Now, I mean, anyone that's ever done economics knows that is an opportunity.
That's a good stat, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. So, but yeah, they're bloody hard to come by. So, but I mean, we could keep going for hours talking about opportunities. Yeah. But it's to be a little bit more creative than just to go out and buy the apartment across the road.
I think it's opening up your mind and recognizing there are opportunities out there rather than just what's on your front door.
Well, I think this is the whole mindset. If you take data centers as an example, just like you presented to our mastermind, I had a gentleman out of Singapore present. Now, he's invested $5 billion in data centers. His current one is $400 million.
Wow.
Now, the average person sits there, and it was quite funny because he was presenting to our mastermind. He said, look, I'll let you small investors participate with about $20 million. and a couple of my mastermind members were typing going, did he say 20? And the challenge is that most people don't even conceive that it's possible. Just yesterday I was looking at 2 data centers that have been built by Google in London. And people just don't think it's even possible to participate. But again, with technology, it is now. So whether you're investing £1,000 or £100,000 or £1 million, you can be participating and investing at that level of quality deal. And whether it's a data center or whether it's Simon Zutshi saying to me, listen, Scott, we're going to buy that office block there and turn it into 42 flats. That's institutional thinking, not mom and pop investing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think part of this bigger thinking comes from the mentoring we've had. We've both been mentored by Roger, who in the past, who is very, very high level thinking. And what's your experience of mentoring?
Look, for me, it's a no-brainer. So I actually did the math. Someone asked me and I went and did the math. I don't know, it's quite hard to do. I know it'd be the same for you, but I worked out, I probably spent close to $1 million in terms of personal development over the years. I think I'm not quite that much, but I'm pretty close to that. It's on or around. I don't know exactly, but it's a lot of money. And it's a lot of time. And for me, it helps you geometrically go to the next level. So I'll give you 3 stories just to explain that. The first one was Roger, by the way. So I'm sitting there on a panel and he's talking about a mastermind. And my excuse was, I don't have the time to join a mastermind. I'm too busy. And he literally said, well, Scott, unless you learn the skills to take your business to the next level, you're never going to have time. And he was right. I joined Crystal Circle. I know you were part of that.
Yes.
And he helped me how to build a whole team, know who I was, and then let me be good at what I am and let other people be good at what they are.
I use that same philosophy when I built Crowd Property. I didn't want to be the person running the business, so I put a whole team around it, and that's thanks to what I learned from Roger to do that.
Exactly. So the irony is I didn't want to join because I didn't have the time, which, by the way, most people have as the excuse. And yet it gave me my time back. It gave you your time back. So that's the first one. The second one was through Tony Robbins. And what was so interesting with Tony Robbins was partnering. So I had this mindset of, let's just talk simple commercial property. I mean, anyone who's ever read Rich Dad, Poor Dad or Real Estate Riches or whatever, it always says, go to commercial property. But I was in the same mindset. I was like, well, I don't have the money. I don't know how to, I don't know how to do it. So I didn't do it. I owned 16 residential houses, but never did a commercial until I did partnering. And Tony Robbins was the one. The fastest way to get to success is to copy successful people. There's a level above that. Just partner with them. Does that make sense? So again, back to mentoring, like if I hadn't gone to Fiji with him, I mean, I spent $50,000 to be there. But I mean, that alone changed my life. I mean, that is wealth migrate. It's partnering. Okay. And the third one, which I probably enjoy the most, is that my mom. I sort of grew up in an environment where my mom was quite conservative. Some would call it negative. Okay, and was like, you can only have this or you can have that. You can be wealthy, but you're going to have bad kids relationships or whatever. It's always like negative. And I mean, you had the same privilege of this. We literally spent a week with Richard Branson.
Yes.
And I mean, it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the guy. And I mean, he's the coolest guy out. Okay. And he literally has everything. He's got a happy wife, 2 great kids, 400 businesses, $8 billion businesses, lives on an island. He's healthy. I mean, he was 65 when we were there, and I battled
to beat tennis every morning.
Yeah, I battled to beat him at sport. I mean, he's done amazing stuff for charity. I mean. What more do you want on the planet? You know what I mean? And that was a real eye-opener to me that stop having constraints. And so whenever I sit in business, any problem I've got, I go, what would Richard Branson do? And I'll give you a simple example. If every one of my staff members or team members send me one WhatsApp or one SMS a day, I would drown. And then I think to myself, well, how would Richard do it? Because he's got 400 businesses. And do you understand? It's just a different way of thinking. So back to your mentoring question, without those different things that I've done in my life, I reckon I'd be a decade behind at least.
And just going back to that Necker Island trip, which obviously we were introduced to that by Roger, who was mentoring. We probably would never would have the opportunity if we weren't doing that mentoring. I mean, that was a really expensive trip, but at the time, that was a stretch for me. I think it's $45,000 just for the week. We had to fly there ourselves. And I probably couldn't really afford it, but I also thought I couldn't afford not to go because I had the opportunity. And for me, it was all about stretching my thinking, and spending that time with Richard Branson, but also the other people on the island. And I remember there was a guy, I don't even remember, who'd sold his business for $20 million just before we got there. And I had a beer with him the very first day, just chatting about it, and I was almost in awe. I was like, oh my God, I'd love to do that. And my business wasn't worth that at the time. And then by the end of the week, I'd realised actually he wasn't that different from me. He had £20 million in the bank, which I didn't have, but he was not that different. And I thought, well, I could maybe do that. And And it was that stretching my thinking and belief of what I could do. That was one of the biggest things I got out of Necker. I had a bit of a shock, obviously. You know, when we had
that makes two of us.
Spending, I mean, anybody can pay to go to Necker Island, right? You know, anyone can do that. We pay a bit more because we were raising money for Virginia Night, which is why Richard takes the time to be there for the whole week. But then spending that amount of money and turning up to Necker Island, and then finding I had to share a room when I got there. And then I found it was you I was sharing with. And I don't know if we were just put together because I don't think they knew we knew each other.
Yeah, no, I think it was
or we were just both in property, really. But that was a bit of a shock, really.
No, look, I'm on your team here. When you spend that much money, you're expecting, 5-star, and then you've got a roommate like a hostel, basically.
Exactly.
But I mean, you know what is interesting about that experience for me, and you talk about not Richard, but the other 25 people.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. Like, I remember sitting with John, and John had literally sold his business. I don't know if you remember, it was a call center business.
Yes.
And he sold for $800 million.
Yeah, I know.
And I remember just sitting there like, $800 million, a call center business, and then just talking to him and like how he built the culture and everything. It was all about culture, like how they built it. And I think one of the things that I enjoyed most was actually spending time with the other people, as you said, and just learning from them and, literally, and just realizing, as you said, that shit, if they can do it, we can do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Because you become like the people around you. And
Correct,
I think most people, they have mothers or family or friends who maybe are not that positive, maybe because they don't get it and they worry about us making mistakes.
Yeah, they've definitely got our best interest at heart. But,
exactly.
But normally.
but they have their limiting beliefs and impose them upon us. So it's so important to get into an environment where you've got like-minded people who are stretching your thinking and are growing you. Otherwise, you'll always stay the same and never change.
Well, it's interesting, I say something quite often. I always try and put myself in the room where I'm the dumbest, poorest person.
Yeah.
And when I went to Necker Island, I definitely felt like the dumbest, poorest person. Like you, I don't even know how I afforded to go there. Yeah. And these oaks are talking about buying islands and whatever, and you're like, wow, okay, this is a whole nother level. But it's interesting. This T-shirt I'm wearing, it actually came from Necker Island because if you remember, we had one homework thing we had to do. And every one of us had to bring a life hack. Do you remember that? And we sat down, and 25 of us all shared our life hack. And like you basically walked away with 25 other ways to improve your life. What's a hack? It's to do something quickly, learn. And we came back, and my business partner actually said to me, well, Scott, you're actually a wealth hacker. And I thought, well, I suppose I am, because whether it's Roger or Richard or anyone, I consistently trying to, and I know you're exactly the same, consistently trying to put yourself in the room to grow, to learn, to aspire to the next level, and you never know enough because you get to this level and there's a level above it. So I just this T-shirt was literally spawned out of Necker Island, and the lessons I learned from that. The other thing I found really interesting by those lessons, most of them were super simple. Yeah, like they weren't these complicated things; they were just simple little things, which geometrically can change your life. And as you said, by being around these people, it was like wow, like. And it certainly helped me go to a whole nother level around dreaming. And just for the point, for everyone who's here, I fundamentally believe that your dreams can become reality. And like what, my father taught me, dream big, my son, because your dreams become your reality type thing. I had a dream of meeting Richard Branson. Like literally, I loved his books, but I just wanted to meet him. Yeah. And then I met him one day, like he was talking at an event, there were like 2,000 people in a room. So when I say I met him, I like shook his hand. But
yeah, you didn't really meet him.
I didn't really meet him, but like most people, they got a picture of a dude, in an auditorium type thing.
They don't know them, yeah.
Exactly, And then I remember like Roger going, like this picture of Roger on Necker Island. I was like, can you even do that? Like I didn't even know that was possible. And it just changed my paradigm of what I wanted. And as you know, you and I got to experience that week with the guy, and it was just incredible. And for me, it's actually, even talking now, it reminds me that I need to keep dreaming, because the more you dream, the more these things become reality.
And it's so true. It's what you believe is possible, and what you also believe you can do as well. And if other people like you have done similar things, that you think actually maybe I can do this as well, and so powerful. So
I think one thing that I think is really important for us non-Americans. The Americans just have this innate belief that they're going to build $1 billion business, whatever it is. Like everything's bigger, better, faster. And for the people that aren't from America, we've got some conditioning, all of us, that we need to get over. Does that make sense? And it's just, you're right. I mean, it's got nothing to do with the property podcast, but it is culturally, you could see the difference between the Americans and the non-Americans, and that's just something to be aware of.
And I think they're more prepared to take risks, calculated risks. They're more prepared to invest in themselves, and they recognise that's an important part of the journey as well.
Completely. No, and again, it's something that we can all learn from and aspire to. And I mean, anyone who's watching this, when you consider where you started, Simon, and where you are now, and I mean, yes, it's 30 years, but it's 30 years of passion, purpose, learning, and consistently getting yourself out there to go to the next level. Anyone who's watching this can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, they can do it much quicker than you and I have done it because they're the benefit of learning from people like us.
Well, completely.
They don't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that saying by Tony Robbins, you can take what it took us a decade to learn, you can do it in a day. And I think that's one of the principles of your mastermind, our mastermind.
Absolutely.
To help people reduce those decades. Because why waste 30 years when you can... But again, I want to be clear, 30 years ago, there was no way to do what either of you and I are doing now.
Yeah.
You had to walk the streets, you had to go buy houses. Now you can literally log on and invest and partner with someone like you. And therefore, you take 30 years worth of experience and you're partnering with the person. It changes the paradigm completely.
And it's so important to recognize that we have to adapt with the market as it changes. We have to adapt and embrace technology, because if we don't embrace it, we're going to be left behind.
Correct, yeah. No, look, I mean, I think the future is really exciting. The one challenge that people have, and anyone watching this, the challenge that they have is they now have the burden of responsibility. You cannot blame the government, blame your background, blame your schooling, because you can't say, oh, but I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, or in English terms, I didn't go to the right university, or any of that. That's rubbish nowadays.
Doesn't matter.
Because you can literally get started. I mean, crowd property is £10 or something. What's the minimum investment?
It's £500.
£500. Okay, the point is it's very accessible for everybody.
Much, much better return you get in the bank.
Exactly. And so people can't sit around and say, I don't know about this, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the access. It's rubbish. So they do. Therefore, the excuses are off the table, which means the burden of responsibility to take control of your life is within your hands.
I think I completely agree with you. And I think actually one of the challenges is there's almost too much information out there. People get overwhelmed. And, on this YouTube channel, we've got lots of great content. And I think sometimes people think they can get rich just by watching YouTube. And you'll certainly learn things and educate. But there's almost so much people get overwhelmed. And I actually think that's when you come on a paid training. If it's a good training, they lay it out for you step by step. Do this, then this, then this, then this. And it saves so much learning time. Trying to learn for free by watching YouTube or listening to webinars and things is a mistake many people make. Whereas when they invest in themselves, especially you've got a money back guarantee that kind of helps as well, you can get the fast track to achieve what you want to, rather than have to reinvent the wheel. So
no, completely. And I think also what's so exciting nowadays, you can also learn while doing.
Yeah, of course.
So you can be learning and doing at the same time. Whereas in the old days, it's almost like you had to go to university to get a degree, and then you could only go and do it. And now you can participate quickly.
Yeah. It's an exciting time, I think.
No, completely. Look, I mean, when I consider where we were 10 years ago, I mean, both of us pretty much started 10 years ago with these platforms. And you consider where AI and everything's going, like where are we going to be in 10 years from now?
I think it's quite exciting, but also a bit daunting. I think the world is going to change. It is changing so much. It's going to change so much more than it has already with AI. I think the average person needs to wake up, because if they're not doing something about it now and investing for the future, I think a lot of people are going to be in real difficult times.
Dude, like when I look at ChatGPT specifically, okay, I didn't even know what that was 2 years ago. And when I consider how much I use it in my life now, and that's 2 years, it's actually hard to imagine 10 years.
Yes.
Like if you just draw that trajectory of what's happening. And so I completely agree with you. It's literally the future's exciting, but you need to embrace it.
Yeah.
And back to your point, you've got to go and learn from people that are doing it. And if back to your webinar thing, when you pay attention. Yeah. Like when I've invested the most money, that's when I've really taken it seriously.
I mean, we were sitting there taking lots of notes in Necker Island.
No, completely. Well, because it's like, this cost a fortune. You know what I mean? Whereas if it was free and it was a YouTube video, chances are you're going to watch it. And I mean, I did this. So I have no doubt other people do this.
Yeah.
Where I would go to a seminar, I'd read a book, I'd go on a course, but I wouldn't actually implement what I learned.
Yeah.
And that's just a waste of time. That's just a lot of knowledge. So I tend to say to people, try and simplify, do less, but then what you do properly.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
That's great advice. And that's a great note to end on, actually, Scott. So, Scott, thanks so much for coming. Really great to connect and great to see you now here in Birmingham. So really pleased to have this time together. Really excited to be partnering with you and finding some opportunities for everyone on the Wealth Migrate platform. And I'm sure there's lots more we're going to be doing. And I'm sure we'll mention more of that in future on the podcast as well. So if you've enjoyed listening to the podcast, make sure you like the video on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you hit the bell icon to get notified anytime a new video comes out. These podcast ones come out every Tuesday. And I look forward to joining you on the next session. So as ever, I encourage you to invest in knowledge, invest in skill.